Identifying the key in late Liszt is difficult at the best of times, so when he actually calls a piece Bagatelle Without Tonality, you know you're in for a confusing time. Written in 1885, only a year before the composer's death, this short, capricious work employs every devious trick in the book to avoid explicitly stating a key, from all-pervading chromaticism to rootless, aimless harmonic progressions. So how then is this music put together, and is it really without tonality? Well, stick around and we'll learn about when Liszt attempted atonality. For all its unique weirdness, this bagatelle is far from a one-off. In his twilight years, Liszt's compositional style underwent a radical shift, yielding many experimental works which in various ways anticipate the music of the following century. For example, you may already be familiar with the stacked fifths in the introduction to the first Mephisto Waltz. But in later life, Liszt also explored stacked thirds in Ossa Arida. And stacked fourths in the third Mephisto Waltz. Then there are the impressionist harmonies of Nuages Gris. And whatever you call the ending of the Mephisto polka. Speaking of Mephisto, the Bagatelle was originally conceived as the fourth Mephisto Waltz, so unsurprisingly it shares many characteristics with the music of that series. Compare, for example, the introduction of our piece with that of the Mephisto polka and second Mephisto Waltz. As you can see, they all start with a bold, unaccompanied gesture in the middle register, and they also all at some point make use of the octatonic scale, formed by alternating whole steps and half steps. But whereas the polka and waltz quickly go on to establish a key, our bagatelle does not. Instead, the enigmatic introduction leads smoothly into the equally enigmatic A theme. Hang on, what about all those G major triads waltzing away in the left hand? Surely they indicate a key. Well, they do and they don't, and this is the crux of the matter. A second inversion G major triad can imply countless different keys, especially when paired with the oscillating minor and major sevenths found in the right hand. So, is this chord 1, the tonic? Or is it a dominant, which would imply C major? Perhaps this is chord 4 in D major. That would nicely account for the D pedal underpinning the texture, and those C sharps which sound suspiciously like leading tones. Or maybe those C sharps represent the dominant and we're actually an F sharp minor. You see the problem we have. Whichever tonality we decide sounds most convincing, it's largely academic until we're provided with a stronger confirmation of key. And if that confirmation never arrives, then we might have to set aside our tonal lens. After a more elaborate repetition of the A theme, which skips up and down the higher registers, the music transitions chromatically to a B theme, closely related to the first. Just when we thought the trail had gone cold, One of our candidate tonalities from earlier makes another case for itself, and this time far more convincingly. Tracing the descending contour of the B theme reveals a clear-cut 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in D major. And this is backed up by the left-hand accompaniment, whose pesky A sharps foil what would otherwise be a pure 5-1 chord progression. It's because of these semi-functional harmonies that the B theme offers comparatively more tonal stability. Although not entirely without tension, the theme concludes and frames the section in unambiguous D major terms, with the dominant repeated 4 times unaccompanied as if to underline itself. This leads us on to our last theme, the C theme, which Liszt uses to really ramp up the excitement. For what though? A Mephistophelian climax, perhaps? It's safe to say that the C theme seems to promise much more than it actually delivers. This syncopated music ascends chromatically, propelled forward by a gradual accelerando and crescendo, before meekly tapering off into silence. The theme here consists of the top notes of the right-hand chords. Isolating just these pitches, and the tune seems to incorporate aspects of the previous 2 themes. Putting the accompaniment back in, and we can see a waltz concealed in the left hand, with the cha-chas falling across 2 bars to form a broader, illusory 3-4. That's all very good, but what about the key? How's our main tonal candidate faring, D major? Well, not too good. We have familiar chords, dominant sevenths and diminished sevenths, but a not so familiar harmonic context. Rather than resolving, which is the conventional function of a dominant, these chords merely shift upwards by semitone again and again and again. And if that didn't thoroughly throw us off the scent, a cadenza follows that serves up what is effectively a harmonic smokescreen. It achieves this disorientating effect through the use of a particular scale, one which we've already heard in this work, the octatonic scale, whose groupings in turn highlight a diminished 7th chord. Liszt used this distinctly non-diatonic scale to start the piece, and now he uses it again to signpost the middle of the piece, which is in fact where this cadenza is positioned. So as well as representing the bane of our harmonic investigation, the octatonic scale is also turning out to have a pretty important structure-defining role. Speaking of structure, here's what we've covered so far. As for the second half, it's very similar to the first, featuring variations of the same material in exactly the same order. The most striking differences this time round are textural. For the A-theme reprise, Liszt inverts the roles of the right and left hands, with the left hand now playing the melody and the right hand the accompaniment. The B-theme is also expanded upon, with some new filigree arpeggios. And that dominant 7th transition from before is replaced with yet more octatonic flourishes. As for the C theme, it's now played an octave higher, and with the tune nestled amidst a sextuplet figure, likely derived from the other 2 themes. And then there's the cadenza, now a coda, which is completely different, except for the diminished 7th chord that underpins it the same as before. But those aren't the only changes. Going back to the A-theme reprise, in addition to the melody and accompaniment switching hands, Liszt has also transposed the theme up a minor third from its original appearance. A few bars later, and the theme is transposed up again, this time by a major seventh. I guess our D major hypothesis from earlier is well and truly out the window now. How do we account for these key changes when we don't even know what the key is, or whether there even is one in the first place? I propose that we set aside our tonal lens and compare A and A1 again. We've covered all the various ways in which they differ, but there's one crucial thing that they have in common. Can you spot it? Elements of both reside within the same octatonic scale. Bringing them into even closer comparison in this reduction, and we find that they also have a striking symmetrical relationship, with A1 spelling out very similar intervals to A, but in the opposite direction. It should come as no surprise then that all the other octatonic material we've found in the piece also conforms to this exact transposition. Considering its ubiquity and structural significance, maybe we could consider this octatonic scale as the scale, occupying the role usually filled by an all-governing diatonic scale. However, the problem with this is that whereas a diatonic scale is hierarchical, with each scale degree serving a distinct function, the octatonic scale is symmetrical, with no one pitch predominating over the other. In other words, a diatonic scale gives us a pretty clear indication of a key, an octatonic scale does not. So, atonal? In one sense, yes. The piece avoids confirmation of a presiding tonality. But, despite never confirming a tonality, the music does imply tonality. Triadic and dominant seventh harmonies abound in what is a mostly familiar musical vocabulary. A better word then might be omnitonal, a descriptor that Liszt himself embraced. Such a term describes a music that flirts with numerous competing keys simultaneously, without ever fully committing to one. So various keys are there, but the music floats indifferently above them, and never in them. Seems like a fairly apt description of today's piece, doesn't it? But regardless of how you want to label it, this is the thing to really take away. With this modest bagatelle, Liszt untethers harmony from its traditional moorings. While not fully without tonality in every sense, the piece does foreshadow the more radical, decisive breaks from tonality which will occur in just a few years' time. In this sense, Liszt's bagatelle sits teetering on the tonal precipice, waltzing all the way. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a comment and subscribe. If you didn't, well, you probably haven't made it this far. Thanks, and see you soon.